Here on Morning at NTV, time now to take note of what is no doubt a disturbing trend of plastic pollution within Uganda, and indeed as is a problem across the world. Uganda, with its diverse ecosystems, including lakes, rivers, national parks, is facing a growing plastic pollution crisis. In urban centers like Kampala, the capital, the challenge is exacerbated by inadequate waste management systems. Today, we have officials who are going to help us understand what interventions are underway to address this particular problem, and also what we should take note of, because at the end of it all, individual responsibility is also very, very important when it comes to solving some of the crises that we face as humans. Mr. Francis Ogwal is a Senior Manager, Environment Planning and Coordination at the National Environment Management Authority. Many thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
And many thanks for joining us too. Jacinta Nekesa, Executive Director at Environment Alert.
Morning, viewers.
Let's begin with Mr. Ogwal.
Yes.
Nonetheless, because you are NEMA, and NEMA has often found itself in a spot of bother.
Yes,
on many of the environment-related crises that the nation faces. We appreciate and know that there are a multiplicity of interventions that are underway, but sometimes the human nature, when it comes to a particular pressing problem at any one point in time, we might be coming hard on you. So forgive me for starting with you.
It's
I'm
okay.
going to come hard on you. Why is NEMA dropping the button?
Thank you. When you say NEMA is dropping the button, it is a wide question. First of all, let me begin by saying that human beings, by our nature, as you've said, God created us last. Everything else was first created.
Yeah.
So the environment underpins our survival. Everything that you need every day to live on this planet. You're talking about water, talking about food, medicine, the air we breathe, everything is from the environment. So the quality of the environment determines our well-being as well, in terms of health, in terms of economic development, and so forth. So when the environment is getting degraded, human beings are also becoming part of the problem. In fact, we suffer more from that. So often people tend to think that environment might be something far away from them. Somebody is busy littering, powering, maybe pollutant somewhere. You think that is far. It's not part of me. But eventually it catches up with us. So we have to be mindful about what happens to the environment. Now, when you say NEMA has dropped the button, are you saying in terms of managing plastics? Are you saying in terms of managing the environment? But for today, I think let me just try to focus our attention on the problem of plastics.
The plastics problem.
The plastic problem, because it is a global problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me give you the perspective globally, then I come down here nationally. First, globally, the world produces about 8.3 billion tons of plastics globally. That is annual, 8.3. And out of that, only about 25% is recycled. So you're talking about 6.3 getting back, billion tons getting back to the environment globally. Now you come into Uganda here, we produce about 7,000 metric tons, 7,000 annually. That's what we do in Uganda here. But daily, on a daily basis, we produce 600 tons.
Of plastic.
Yeah, of plastics. But out of that, we only recycle about 6%. About 6%. Meaning 536 tons daily is ending up on the environment. And that is why you will see more plastic problem than the plastic use now. Because everybody, especially the single-use plastics, people use and throw, use and throw. And then you see the environment getting so littered. So the issue right now is that plastics has become a problem to us, not the convenience that it brought of carrying food and every other thing. You know, people saying you can carry your meat without being worried that it's going to break. It is now off. We are now off there. In fact, from the other health perspective, leave alone the physical, the most worrying one now is what we call the microplastics. the small particles that when plastic is thrown into the environment, degrades and gets into the water, gets into our food chain we eat, and gets into our body. Now, out of that, we have problems with our reproductive system, especially the men. It is known it's going to affect us badly. Studies have also shown that microplastics are now found in the breast milk of women. So the thing is that plastics has engulfed us from an environmental point of view, but also from a health point of view. So time has come for us to look at other alternatives, but not all categories of plastics. Again, we are going to say that we phase them out. This is single-use plastics. Single-use plastics. That we are mainly focusing on here.
Can we be very specific, especially for the layman? When you say single-use plastics, microplastics,
yes,
there's a gentleman, or rather somebody out there who might get confused about plastics in breast milk.
Okay, let me try to be simple.
Yeah.
Single-use plastics. These are the small ones, like the ones you see they put juice, the one you use for carrying your food items on, the black ones, sometimes they're transparent. Those are the thin ones.
Yeah.
Those are the single use, because you don't recycle it.
Yeah.
You just, once you've thrown it away, once you've thrown. So those ones are the most problematic at the moment.
Okay.
Now, microplastics, micro means something very small that you cannot see with the eye. So as plastics you throw into the environment, small particles for it breaks. But doesn't mean plastics degrade easily. Plastic takes about 500 to maybe 1,000 years to degrade. So that's why you will always see plastics in the soil whenever you dig. It doesn't. How many of us will stay here for 500 years to see that the plastic has degraded? I don't think there's anyone. So microplastic has the other tiny ones that we don't see with the eye. In fact, studies are now showing that every time you are drinking water from that mineral water bottle, you're also taking in plastic, microplastics. And that is why, for some of these private sector that have already transitioned to use of, we have gone back now to glass bottles. I think Miss Steele has done that.
I see a lot of
Serena has done that. Also, other hotels are doing that now. That is where we need to go. Because we were there, we were once there. Probably you also do know that those days way back, it was Pepsi or Coca-Cola in
glass bottles.
In those bottles. Yeah. So that is where we need to go back. Humanity has moved a full cycle for sure. Okay. Now that we have seen that there is more danger in the use of plastics, especially that category I'm talking about, we need to transition back.
All right. Thank you for that overview, one that gives us a very good idea of exactly what the problem is. Madam Nekesa, you are with the Environment Alert, a civil society organization that is pushing matters and activism in environment. I know you do agree entirely with Mr. Ogwal, but you are pushing solutions, not so?
Yes, please.
How best, or what interventions are underway to address this particular problem?
Excuse me. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that question. As Francis has said, the problem is enormous. And as CSOs, we recognize this problem, and we want to work with the government. We want to work with other actors to ensure that we reverse this problem. So as CSOs, I represent the CSOs who are doing work on environment and natural resources management in Uganda. These are over 60, almost 100 CSOs in the subsector. So we are working to ensure that the policies that are put in place by government, that these are known to the communities.
Yeah.
So some of the interventions are around sensitization of communities, so that they know the policies that government has put in place against the plastic pollution. We also work to ensure that they know the dangers of plastic pollution. What is the impact of plastic pollution? What should the communities be doing? But also we want to engage with the private sector, because the question is, when we talk about plastic pollution, who is actually producing these plastics? These are companies that are producing beverages, the companies that are producing packaging materials. what is their role? What role are they playing in ensuring that we end this crisis? So engaging them, bringing these stakeholders together, dialoguing about it so that we find solutions. So capacity building for the different actors so that they know how to recycle, they know the alternatives. Yeah, when we are saying end plastic pollution, what are the alternatives? Okay. So those are some of the interventions that we are undertaking as CSOs. Yeah.
Before I return to Mr. Ogwal, has there been any particular aspect that hasn't been onboarded quickly or smoothly by the government that you think we are working behind schedule on?
I must appreciate that government is doing a lot to end this crisis. But for me, when you ask what have they not yet done, when we talk about these policies, yes, we have very good policies in place. I think the challenge on government and what we urge them as CSOs, can we ensure that these policies are implemented? So ensuring that when we talk about these single-use plastics and eradicating them or doing away with them, we have a policy in place that has been put in place by NEMA. What is NEMA doing to ensure that this policy is implemented right from the national level up to the decentralized level, that's district, up to the community level? Are people aware about these policies? And how can we ensure that these policies are implemented? Quite often, people say Uganda, we are very good at putting these policies in place, but implementation is the problem. So that's what we are asking as CSOs. Can government ensure that these policies are implemented? And for some of these things, we need to use a carrot and stick. You sensitize, you ensure that people are brought on board, use the soft approaches, but when soft approaches fail, what happens? You need to use the stick. And that's where the law comes in, and that's where we ask government to ensure that the law is implemented. Thank you.
I won't ask a question. Just respond to that, because she has questions in there on implementation and the fact that maybe you might not be doing the best you ought to do in order to ensure that you rectify this particular problem.
The carrot and stick. Perhaps more of the stick than the carrot, because Ugandans, they would say create awareness, create awareness. Even some people who are aware of certain things still go and do the contrary. It's not that awareness will give you the ultimate answer. But let me first give you a little bit of the genesis of the problem of plastics in Uganda, legally, from a legal point of view. In 2019, the National Environment Act was revised. Previously, it was the National Environment Act Cap 153. So it was revised. Now it is National Environment Act Cap 181. But in 2019, that law, when it was taken to Parliament as a bill, we had proposed that single-use plastic be banned.
Be banned completely. Completely.
Yeah. Now, it reaches there, and things change from there. And instead, Section 76(1) of that act now said that all plastics are banned except those above 30 microns. Now that is the genesis of the problem we see today. 30 microns, 30.1, 30.5, 40, 50, those are thin papers.
Very thin, very thin.
So we need everybody in this country, including our legislators, to take up this matter very seriously. And we are already making proposals to change this section 76 of the Act so that we ban single-use plastics. That is something that's going to come. Now, when it comes to the question of enforcement, we have 45 million people. If you go to countries that environment is clean, that things are moving on well, it is the mindset of the people, of the individual. You cannot police 45 million people. How many people must NEMA have? Enforcement, how many? Do we need 20 million? How many? I'm not saying we are not, that we are, enforcement that is not a challenge, it is. But we need people to change their mindset. You're not going to drink your juice, your mineral water, you're moving up country or the street, you just keep throwing the bottles everywhere. So that littering part, people have to change. enforcement will come, but people have to change. Otherwise, it is so difficult to say you're going to enforce the law on everybody. But first, we need that mindset change.
The mindset change.
Yes.
No doubt, that's a very significant one. And when you see countries in Europe that have actually managed the waste problems, it's down to that.
Yeah.
But we must also agree that within the African context, at community level, the African has far more pressing problems than where that plastic will go. And the solutions that are sought ought to be attentive to the realities of the African.
Yes.
I was thinking, and this is a layman's solution, government can afford massive recycling plants and then buy back some of these plastics at a certain fee. I see so many boys around town going picking these plastic bottles and the single use. In my mind, I'm like, if a kilogram of single use plastics already disposed cost a certain amount of money, it would be a good incentive for people to go and collect the things so that they're taken to a central place for recycling or...
Yeah, okay. Let me just give you some feedback on that.
First, you've already tried it out?
No, I want to contribute to the conversation.
Quickly.
One, single-use plastics, the 30 microns and what have you, cannot be recycled. No. The one that you're talking of recycling are the plastic bottles. Yes. That is why you see those people selectively.
I've seen men ban single-use with Kavera.
So those ones cannot be recycled. The one that you see being recycled is the bottles and others. The one that are relatively thicker. That is the one. But these thin things of 30 microns, no. And that is why we're saying they should go. But secondly, even globally, nobody has succeeded in recycling plastics totally. I've told you already, out of the 8.3 billion globally, only 25%, that is 6.3. Right. So even Uganda, we don't have the facilities alone. It is expensive to put that. So the best thing to do is to reduce the plastics getting to the environment. So that even the little capacity we have could recycle what is there. But with all these quantities going in, we are going to get overwhelmed, and already we are. So it is not, and that is not something that the government you'd say would venture in most. It is mainly the private sector to go into that kind of venture, because it also brings in revenue. It can generate income to them. But at the same time, it is not cheap to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
I realize that the challenges are more than MorningAtNTV can go in trying to solve. Madam Nekesa, have the final word, and what kind of benchmarks can be, for example, undertaken by NEMA and government?
My last word is that this problem of plastics cannot be addressed just by any single one agency.
That's right. We
really need to be coordinated and to work together. The CSOs have a contribution to make, the government has a contribution to make, the private sector has a contribution to make, but even the households, because they are the producers of the plastics, we are the users of those plastics, so it has to start also at the household. Francis talked about mindset change. That's a big thing that we have to deal with, and anything to do with the behavior, with attitudes, usually takes time. Sometimes I'm moving in the city, and you see someone sees a clean street and it tosses out plastic through the window of a taxi.
Very disturbing.
Yeah, so it's very disturbing. It's about behavior, it's about attitudes of people. And we really need collective effort
to rectify this.
Exactly.
Jacinta Nekesa, Executive Director at Environment Alert, many thanks, and many thanks to you too. Francis Ogwal, Senior Manager, Environment Planning and Coordination at NEMA. It's been a pleasure hosting you. That will do it for the Tech